Brilliant stuff. Now please welcome the director of Skyfall, Mr. Sam Mendes.
Morning.
It is morning as well.
Yeah.
Well, £20 million opening weekend, the biggest Bond
It
ever.
all comes personally to me.
Do you have an account just waiting?
Yeah, full Skyfall account. Yeah,
You must be fairly happy with that.
Delighted, absolutely thrilled. Yeah. Yes, and surprised on some level as well. I don't know. I didn't feel it would be that people would take to it to that degree, and so it's really a lovely surprise.
It's a nice conclusion to a journey that began when you were recruited personally by James Bond himself, Daniel Craig. He was the the instigator. How did that happen? How did it come about?
It's like a sort of MI6 sting. I was at a party. He was doing a play on Broadway with Hugh Jackman, and I was at Hugh's birthday party. I don't know Hugh very well, but because I'd happened to have gone to the play a couple of days earlier, he invited me, and I said I know Daniel because he had been in Road to Perdition, which I did 11 years ago, and so I'd stayed in touch, and he remained a friend. And I said to him, when are you doing the next Bond movie? And he said, I don't know. And I said, and who's directing it? And he said, I don't know. Do you want to do it? And I can honestly say that I hadn't really thought about it until that moment. And then in that moment, I found myself saying yes. I had a feeling in the pit of my stomach. And the more I thought about it over the next couple of weeks, the better of an idea it seemed. I felt I needed a challenge. I wanted to come back to England and do something on a big scale again, work on a big scale. I wanted to work with Daniel again. And something had happened to me, I suspect, some of the other members of the audience when we watched Casino Royale, which is that Bond seemed to come back to life again as a different kind of character and felt relevant and real and exciting in a way that he hadn't for a while. And it all seemed to be a very good idea. Then, of course, I had to meet the producers because really Daniel's is not allowed to offer me the job.
He didn't have the contracts right there and then.
No, exactly. And I think the following morning, after he sobered up, he thought maybe it wasn't it wasn't really his position to offer it to me. But anyway, I'm very pleased he did.
Absolutely. Was there a romance involved when you heard the words James Bond and you thought, oh, maybe is this something that when you were watching Bond movies as a kid, did you ever think, well, one day I'd maybe like to do this? Or?
No, I never in a million years thought I would ever direct a film, let alone direct a Bond film. But of course there's a romance. And I, like anyone, I suspect, or certainly most of the boys of my generation began a relationship with Bond 10, 11, 12 years old. And my first movie was Live and Let Die. So I always had a big soft spot and always have had a big soft spot for Roger Moore and for that particular movie. And I remember vividly how scary and exciting and new and just cool the whole thing felt, and how inaccessible at the same time to me growing up in North London. And then you go through. I think everyone has sort of a strange relationship. You with Bond. It depends which Bond you grew up with, and everyone has different perspectives on it. And one of the things about directing a Bond movie is you do find yourself constantly being bombarded with other people's opinions, and they're all different, because everyone has a different template as Bond. Some are Sean Connery, some are Roger Moore, some are Pierce Brosnan, or whatever. And some wanted to be funnier, some wanted to be more serious, some wanted to go back to the Fleming, some want more gadgets, some want less gadgets, some want more comedy, less comedy. And so you get very used to kind of cutting yourself off from the white noise of everyone's opinion and just trying to make your own Bond, And what I'm most proud of with this movie is that it's very much the movie I wanted to see, and at the same time I've tried to channel at various points my inner 12-year-old, that little boy sitting watching Live and Let Die, who just want to give kids and adults that level of excitement again, because it's a big thing.
Was there a moment when it finally hit you, perhaps on set, that you were directing a James Bond film? Because I know Javier Bardem said that it was a moment his first day as Silva the bad guy, he couldn't get his words out because he suddenly realised, I'm a Bond villain.
Yeah, I saw it happen. Actually, he obviously had an out-of-body experience. He was in the middle of a speech, and he just blanked completely. And he pointed at Judi and Danny Wiz. That's Judi Dench. That's James Bond. What am I doing here? It was charming because he had a moment where he thought, I'm in a Bond movie. And. I had a few of those moments, but it's funny, you're so focused, there's so much tension and so much pressure on a daily basis with any movie, let alone a movie of this scale. You have those moments when you're on your own. I had them a couple of moments when I finished the movie and I looked at it and I realised that I'd made a Bond film. But you're in such a tunnel the whole time and so obsessed. And also you've got we had a very little time in post on this movie, so I was working on it right up to the moment that we screened it for the first time. Literally 48 hours before the first press screening, I was still making changes, you know. So getting a distance on it, I think that's going to come, you know, maybe in a year's time, and I bump into it on TV or something, and I see it with some objectivity for the first time, because it's a very difficult thing to maintain objectivity, and a lot of filmmakers don't like to. I mean, Ridley Scott, for example, never watches his own movie ever again, you know, from the moment he finishes it, and I kind of understand why. It's very odd, that whole sense of you've got no distance on it, and you only see the flaws and the things that you wish you'd done differently, you know.
You talked about the white noise surrounding you on a movie like this, and traditionally, probably more in the 60s and 70s, Bond directors were seen as very much people like Lewis Gilbert and John Glenn, people like that, and Guy Hamilton. They would direct the actors, and the action sequences would be very much left to the second unit. Was that the case with you, or did you try and impose yourself on the action sequences as well? And
it's entirely. I impose myself on it all, and I think you have to now. It's very different, you know. Now we are surrounded by action movies and movies that are on a big scale. You know, franchise films take up, I would think, majority of the marketplace in terms of the number of people who go to see it. I mean, in those days there was no such thing as a franchise. There was no such thing as a continuing series of pictures. Bond was the first and remains the oldest, which is why it's been going now 50 years. And I think that therefore the demands are much greater. And I think you're in a very interesting time now, which is maybe not entirely healthy, but it's what it is, which is that middle-scale films, movies that I've made for the last 10 years, $50, $60 million films, let's say, are not being made at all anymore. They're making very small films in the independent sector, which have to fall approximately below $25 million, or they're making enormous films, and they're making a lot of them. And so you're having this odd moment where filmmakers who might not have addressed bigger films in the past, if they want to work on a big scale, they sort of have to do that. Now, part of the attraction for me was rolling my sleeves up and getting stuck into action. You know, for me that was the challenge. I didn't know whether I could do it or not. I needed to be shocked out of my usual way of making a picture. You know, and I was very aware that when it was announced I'd be doing it, people would go, "That's an odd choice. You know, he's never done action before." That's the sort of thing that gets me up out of bed in the morning. You know, it's a challenge, and it's so I of course my fingerprints are all over it. On the other hand, you need an enormous number of people in this world of larger scale movies that you wouldn't normally work with. I mean, I've never worked with a head of special effects, a head of visual effects. Well, I've had visual effects, but in the past, but not to this degree. Head of stunts, you know, and thousands of people involved in all of those three departments who I learnt things from, and who I was feeding off the whole time, and who helped me, along with a brilliant second unit director Alex Witt, put those sequences together. But for me, the most important thing was to previs them and storyboard them and conceive them way in advance. So I felt I could establish the style with which I wanted to do action. You know, I didn't want to put 7 cameras up and shoot handheld and wobbly cameras and what have you. That's just not how I wanted to do it. I wanted to shoot this movie in a much more classical way, and to prove that action can still work within that, you know. So, and I needed to impose that, because I think a lot of the time people have got used to shooting action in a certain way over the last 5 or 6 years, and it's not always this way. And this is slower because the camera needs to remain still. You know, we're being much tougher about the way things were lit. I was working with a great cinematographer who is used more to working on 1 and 2 cameras than 5. And so it was also persuading people that it was going to take a little longer as well.
And one of the great things about Bond over the years is, by and large, it does stunts practically. It does things for real, and again, that's something you wanted to do with this.
Absolutely. I feel that audiences now know the difference between a real explosion and a CGI explosion. You know, I think that there's a weightlessness that has crept into big-scale filmmaking in terms of visual effects that somehow detaches you as an audience from the image. You don't feel the power of it. So I did what Bond has always done to a degree, which is to create it for real as much as possible, and then use visual effects to supplement it, enlarge it, develop it, whatever. But there's always a core of reality in everything. I think there's maybe only... I don't think there's maybe only one shot in the entire movie that is built from scratch, if you know what I mean, that is just built in a computer. In fact, I don't think there is one.
Okay.
But of course, you know, when you're making a fantasy movie or you're making something that has its own universe, it's essential to use visual effects. But with Bond, it always has to maintain a core of reality.
So when you have Daniel Craig on top of a train, you actually have
Daniel Craig on top of a train. Yes, he is that mad. It's one of the great things about working with Daniel as Bond is that he will put himself in those situations, and it's not so important. I mean, there are ways of tricking an audience, face replacements and all that sort of stuff these days, where you put a stuntman in and you put Daniel's face on the stuntman. And of course, in shots which are super dangerous, then you have to do that, because there's no way you would ever risk someone's life, particularly not, Daniel Craig. But a lot of the time he did things that he didn't have to do, and I said to him, "You don't have to do this," and he said, "Well, let me have a go. I'll stand on the train and let's try fighting on the still train. Right now, let's take it at 10 miles an hour. Now 30 miles an hour. Before you know it, he's traveling at 50 miles an hour. Doing a fist fight on top of the train, 500 feet drop below, and my heart connected by a wire that's thinner than my finger, and I'm thinking, please don't fall off, And I was genuinely, my heart was in my mouth. But what happens when you have a guy doing that is that everyone is lifted by it. Yeah. It's God help you if you're a member of the crew when you see your leading actor do that and you're not giving 100%. Because he obviously is, and it's a leadership thing. He shows the way. And also, you can feel it in the film. I think it seeps into the film, that kind of commitment, that kind of physical commitment. When he runs, when he fights, you feel as a man really on the edge of what he's capable of physically. And so I think it does affect the whole atmosphere of the film, both making and watching it.
Well, we have a couple of clips from the film, both of which involve Daniel Craig on top of a train. I think let's take a look at the first one, and then we'll have a chat about it afterwards. Please roll the clip. Thank you. I have to say, as a Bond fan, I think that may be one of the coolest things I've seen Bond do. The quick clip of the cuffs, it's amazing. How difficult was it to get that shot?
I've got to tell you, the shooting of the cuffs is Daniel's idea. That was, because he occasionally had a little thing, had a little sort of private smile, and I'm just going to try something, Sam. I'm going to try something to say, may not like it. And I just laughed when I saw that, because, that was him jumping. Again, it was as dangerous as it looks. How long did it take us?
Yes.
Well, it's all shot in so many different parts. The whole opening sequence of the movie, which is designed as a kind of almost a series of Russian dolls. You think it's going to be one kind of action sequence, and then it's another, and then another, and another. Starts as a car chase, and then it's a shootout, and then it's a bike chase, and the bikes go across roofs and through alleyways, and then he gets from the bike to I'm not going to tell you how, if you haven't seen it, onto the top of the train, and then it's they chase across the top of the train, and then he gets into this digger. And it's interesting how action sequences develop, because you're constantly trying to find ideas within ideas. So you've already got the idea that they're chasing across the top of the train, and then someone in a meeting, probably somebody like Gary Powell, head of stunts, or Alex Witt, says, well, what if there's some heavy machinery on the train? What if we, and then someone says, well, what if you got into it? And you cherry pick, hopefully, the best ideas that come up. There's lots of ideas that are crazy, and you say, no, I don't think we can go that far. And that was one we went with, and then you pursue it logically, and then one of the characters is uncoupling the cars, and he has to keep the cars together, and then it's a series of complicated, a mixture of. I mean, everything you see there is real, but it's supplemented by visual effect, and it's shot probably across 2 months at various points. Because each thing has a very different set of demands. The digger going into the roof of the carriage, you have to set up the roof of the carriage in a particular way. Also, that shot underneath the digger claw coming into the roof with the it's a train full of people, and it's very dangerous. So they have to be organised in a particular way. But also, I wanted that feeling that, and this was something the editor, who's a great man called Stuart Baird, was very keen to get that feeling that you're reminding the audience all the time that the thing is pulling apart. And so, for example, the way in which the digger peels back the roof of the train, that's real, but the sparks are visual effects.
Okay.
And the sense of it coming under pressure. I can't even remember now, added a little bit of camera shake in post to give it a sense that everything was about to, explode. And that big wide shot when he's walking which I deliberately held that master of Daniel walking across the digger arm, which is a helicopter shot. Again, totally different setup on a camera copter. To hold that long and to add that visual effect of the back of the carriage splitting as he's walking, and then cut to the real Daniel jumping off onto the train as the whole back of the train is pulled away, which again was a whole different setup. Each piece of that takes 2 days to set up and shoot, and there are other things happening in between.
So a few sleepless nights in trying to keep track of all these things.
Yeah, the most difficult thing is holding the whole thing in your head and trying to work out if you've missed anything. That's the most difficult thing, and that's where you need a good editor who's editing alongside you to make sure that he's able to say, well, there's a missing piece here. But yeah, there was a few sleepless nights.
And how involved are you as well with things like the credit sequence, the classic Bond credit sequence, with the Adele song? And
the credit sequence I had a very strong general idea for. I said, Bond is effectively drowning and going into the underworld, and as he sinks down, it's a little bit like Alice going down the rabbit hole. He passes by both memories and a kind of almost we tell the story of the film,
yes.
But you wouldn't know it yet. But then you give that as a general idea to somebody as clever as Danny Kleinman, and then he's able to take it to another level, and he's immensely skilled. And we talked about point of view a lot. I mean, there's Bond's point of view, but really he came up with a series of storyboards. I gave notes on the storyboards. He did them again. Then he pre-visits it. You give notes, and then you pray as our prayers were answered for a great song, and sure enough, Adele delivered that, and then he started working to the track itself, which of course gives him so much, So it's as everything in the movie is a kind of confluence of different people, and a real sense of everyone coming together to try and create a unified vision, and that's a good example of it when I feel it works. I mean, Danny's work is wonderful in that.
One of the unique things about Bond is that you're not just competing against other franchises, say Bourne, Batman, whatever.
Yeah.
You're competing against 50 years of history and 22 previous films. How do you make things distinct and different while also nodding to the past?
I think you've got to believe that, just by dint of the fact it's yours, it's going to be different.
Yeah.
But what I did, and I was lucky enough to have the time to really work with the writers on the script, and for me, what I did almost as an exercise to begin with is to say, right, let's take away the things we know we're going to have to do. We're going to have to do action. We're going to have the girls. We're going to have glamorous locations. Let's put them to one side. We can sort that out later. What's the actual story, what's Bond's story? Because I think there was a time when we sort of left Bond behind as a character in the mid-70s, and Bond became the glue that stuck together a series of glamorous locations. And,
yes.
And then, he came back as a central character very, very strongly in Casino Royale when he had a love story and you felt that there was something at stake for him. So I wanted to work out what Bond's story was, and then add in everything else. But at the same time, I was eager to sprinkle in a mischievous way, elements of Bond that I love, and I loved. It's like I was saying earlier, was channeling my inner 12-year-old, and I wanted very much to get the Aston Martin DB5 back in, but to do it in a way that made sense in the story, and to add in all sorts of elements from Fleming that he mentioned in the books that had never been put in the movies, like Bond's past, his parents, and certain other elements that I wouldn't give away in case you haven't seen the film. So. It's just trying to balance all of those things and at the same time, tell a very specific personal story in the middle of it.
There's also the return of animals to Bond. We saw in the trailer a scorpion, which was that a nod to Diamonds Are Forever? And there's
is there a scorpion? You see, this is the thing. I don't know as much about Bond. This is the other shocking thing. It's like one of the things I decided was I had a choice. I'm doing a Bond movie. Do I sit down and watch the whole lot again, or do I not look at the whole lot again? I don't want to look at sort of half of them. And I decided not to go there because I thought otherwise I'm just going to be bombarded with images, and I'm trying to make a film. Images from other films are not helpful. So I went to the books more than the films.
Okay.
But as a consequence, I do feel like I don't know as much about Bond as a lot of other people, yourself included. So no, it wasn't. What it was an attempt to find a kind of game, a deadly game. that indicated in some way the depths to which Bond had sunk at that point in the story, where he doesn't really care whether he lives or dies anymore. And it's a kind of Russian roulette. That if anything, there was a little bit of, in my head, Christopher Walken in Deer Hunter. You know, that sort of sense that he's gone. He's just gone. He's gone somewhere else, and he may not be able to come back. So it's trying to find a way that those moments, those ideas mean something to the story rather than simply being, you know, a throwaway detail.
Okay, so let's see how Bond gets to that point now. There's the second clip from the pre-credit sequence, and it's more Daniel Craig on top of a train.
Oh, more.
And then, of course, that fades into Adele and the credit sequence, and off we go.
Yes.
But that sets up an interesting theme that runs through the film of a sort of broken Bond trying to put himself back together. And there's, without giving too much away, there are numerous references to Bond aging, to old versus new, to old dog, new tricks. Was that something that you very much wanted to put in? And I guess Daniel as well.
Yes. I mean, I did. I wanted to test Bond to the limit. I wanted to ensure that he wasn't pretending to be a younger man, you know, and that we were making use of people's real ages and their real dramatic weight. So Daniel does have to stand there while people call him old and finished quite a lot, which takes a certain amount of strength as an actor, I think, but, to be confident about, you know, not pretend to be a younger man. And but of course, the theme that runs through it is, you know, when he comes back, as it were, from the dead, everything is changed, everything is different. There's a different Q, there's a different MI6, it's in a totally different place. M isn't giving the orders anymore, everything's changed. And I love the idea of him really asking himself, well, what's the point? Why don't I just go back to my anonymous life again? Why do I continue with this insanity? I mean, there are answers in the movie. And so really the whole story is about testing. Why do we need the Secret Intelligence Service? Why do we need secret agents? Why do we need Bond? And by inference, why do we need Bond movies? There's a sly, you know, why has it endured? Why do we still endure, you know, a figure whose roots are so firmly in the Cold War, and yet somehow still he seems to symbolize something more than he first appeared, and continues to regenerate himself and to be reborn generation after generation now, 3 generations of people growing up with these movies. So for me, it was a way of trying to make sense of that as well, and that's what the discussion of the old and the new is there for in the movie. And
did you make sense of it? Did you come up with
an answer? I think we've got a few answers in there, and I think what I'm most pleased with is that there are also people stating the other side of the equation. You know, MI6. I mean, you see it in the trailer. You know, Silva, Javier Bardem's character saying MI6. You know, England, the Empire, MI6. You're living in a ruin as well. You just don't know it yet. And there's many times M is told that she's a relic as well. But I think that probably the movie does come down on the side of old-fashioned values in a way. And the third act of the movie is constructed around an idea of kind of back to basics, which I think is very much what I suppose there's some element of personal nostalgia involved in that.
And one of the classic elements of Bond as well is the Bond girls. And we saw one there, which is Naomi Harris's Eve, and the other one is Bernice Marlowe's Severine. But interestingly, the main Bond girl in this film is Judi Dench's M. Can you talk about that and the relationship between Bond and M? And it's very pivotal to this film.
Yes, I mean, I think that, you know, I can't talk about it greatly because I don't want to give the story away for those of you who haven't seen it, but I feel like, you know, I felt that was a relationship that hadn't been explored, and that to a degree, Bond had been trapped in playing the same scenes for years with M, Q, Moneypenny, and the usual MI6 folk, and that somehow we needed to break that and open it up again. So that's something we were very interested to do, and it you know, I think it's the movie's leading somewhere big that I can't really talk about, but knowing that where we were headed the whole time was very helpful.
Absolutely. It's got a fantastic cast, probably the best cast seen in the Bond film. You worked with many of them, Ray Fiennes, Judi Dench. Was it like an old reunion in a way? It
was very nice. I mean, you know, if you're going to come home, I made 5 American movies, and you know, to finally make an English film, to come back with a cast like that and with people who you know and feel comfortable with is an added bonus, really. And also, they just, you know, they can do so much with so little. You know, like great screen actors, they can tell a story at unbelievable speed with a look or a moment, a line. You know, you find that you need much less. You need less dialogue. You can compress things, you know, I think the film is the way it is partly because of the actors. They give it so much. You know, and you've got people like Rory Kinnear and Ben Whishaw and, you know, Albert Finney and Helen McCrory, people are working on unbelievably high level, coming in to do, you know, relatively small roles, which I think that's one of the reasons why it feels so full as well.
You mentioned they're coming home after doing 5 American movies, and there's a sense of Bond comes home in this film as well, because I can't remember a Bond film that takes place so much in London.
Yeah, cheaper
for one thing, yeah.
You don't have to go to, you know. Yeah, I mean, I was. This sort of happened that way, really, because of the story I talked about earlier. I want to tell the story about MI6, so you know, MI6 is in London, and that's where we ended up. But I wanted to give London a very specific flavour. You know, it's my hometown. It's sometimes more difficult to see with objectivity places that you know very well, and so I had to reimagine London as a darker, rainier, much more mysterious place. And we go underground in London a lot. We built a lot of those sets, and a lot of it shot at night because I wanted to keep that atmosphere of mystery and kind of threat in London. And one of the things I suppose I'm most proud of is the feeling that London has in the movie. Yeah. But also one of the great pleasures was, you know, it's not every day you get to shut down the whole of Whitehall, you know, on a Sunday morning. And one of my fondest memories of the movie is, you know, 6 o'clock in the morning, the sun's coming up, and walking down the middle of Whitehall, and totally empty, you know, and just thinking, you know, that was a moment I thought, this is pretty cool, doing a Bond movie. You know, not many movies can do this.
And we also get to see, and again, this is in the trailer, Bond on the tube.
Yes,
which is amazing.
In Rush Hour as well.
In Rush Hour, yeah.
And Q says to him, you know, so welcome to Rush Hour on the tube. It's not something you'd know much about. And we have a little fun with that. But I felt it very important that he was sort of thrown into the middle of this sequence, which happens in underground London, not just the underground as the tube, but also, you know, cellars and vaults and you know, underground waterways and secret tunnels and offices that were built during the war. Yeah. Because, you know, London, below London, I mean, I'm not the first person to mention this, but there are so many books and so much. I mean, there is a city beneath our feet here, which is bigger than the city itself. You know, there's layers and layers of tunnels and, you know, catacombs and all sorts. And I saw some stuff that it just was astonishing. You know, the tube crash itself, we constructed because obviously, you know, you wouldn't be surprised to hear we couldn't do that for real, but we did build it. But we built the catacombs in that on the 007 stage at Pinewood based on a catacombs that we discovered, or the brilliant location department discovered under Finsbury Park. Completely sealed off, and you have to go down a single manhole in the middle of a field. I mean, literally in the middle of a, you know, patch of grass, and there is this unbelievably beautiful Victorian catacombs. You know, arch after arch after arch, stretching on as far as you can see, preserved for architectural reasons, inaccessible to the public. And, you know, seeing those sorts of worlds, which one sees all the time, you know, whether it be walking up onto the rooftops of the Grand Bazaar, you know, and seeing places that you're not allowed to see in daily life. That was one of the big gifts of the movie for me.
Wow, phenomenal. Okay, so if you have any questions now for Sam, now's the time.
Thanks. Hi, Sam.
Hello.
Hi. Can you talk a bit about the development process? So how did you work with Purvis and Wade? How did they work with John Logan? And how did the script come together?
It happened in stages, really. When I came on the movie, there was a treatment that didn't work, and I think we all felt we wanted to walk away from that. But Rob and Neil, Purvis and Wade, who if you don't know, have written or co-written the last 3 or 4 Bond movies. I was very grateful for their immense knowledge, know-how, and they kind of, with me, over a course of about 6 to 9 months, just chipped away on the basis of a story. And then at a certain point, we hit a dead end, I think. And they had been used to, in the last 2, maybe 3 movies, having another writer arrive and take it on from that stage and work with them. And John Logan was the person I wanted to go to, somebody I'd worked with on the screenplay of Sweeney Todd, actually, which I developed and then didn't direct. and Tim Burton made. And I knew John from that, and also as a playwright in the theatre, and he felt like he had the right energy to do it. And then, just as that happened, MGM went into bankruptcy, and we had to postpone the movie. And so there was a sort of 9 months when I officially was not supposed to be working on it, because it wasn't supposed to exist, you know. So I was called a consultant for that time, sort of so I could carry on working. And John, who is in addition to being very, very good, is immensely generous. And you know, he took the script and said, look, don't panic. So much of what Robert Neal has done works, but I think this is where we should take it. And his confidence and his clarity of vision at that point was very key. And then over those 9 months when we were waiting, really, that's when it really turned around as a script. A lot of the raw material was already there, but John kind of finessed it, gave it great clarity, great confidence, and also we spent a lot of time just bashing things out, he and I together, in a series of cafes and restaurants around the world, actually around London and New York and Paris. So he really took it to that. And then, you know, he was the writer that took it through rehearsals and what have you. But I was very conscious all the time to keep Rob and Neal involved at every stage. They got, you know, they get the call sheets, they get the scripts, they get everything sent. And if they had notes, they would send them to me. And often they were great notes. And right the way through to the preview, they were there. Both they and John were there. So it felt like a team right through to the end. And I think that's you need very generous writers to do that for each other, you know. Great respect, and I felt very happy with how it worked out in the end.
Did you have writers on set?
No, but that's not because I don't want writers on set. I mean, I've worked a couple of times with writers, particularly original screenplays. Alan Ball was there every day of American Beauty, and Dave Eggers was there a lot on Away We Go, but and Justin Haythe on Revolutionary Road, actually. But John Logan is in America, and he doesn't. Some writers don't like being there. I mean, it's very, very boring, you know. So he didn't want to be there. So there were, you know, people popped in occasionally, but mostly on the end of a phone.
Okay. I think there was a gentleman here, and then I'll come over here. Thank you.
Hi, Sam.
Hello.
I thought the film was fantastic, brilliant.
Thank you.
It's a modern masterpiece.
Oh, thank you.
Just one critic. I thought the gun barrel sequence could have been put into the front of the film.
Yeah. You're not the first who said that.
I thought that was a sort of silent nod to Quantum of Solace, which I liked. It kept a continuation. My question is, would you like to direct the next James Bond film? If not, who would you like to see direct the next James Bond film? Thank you.
It's so funny you mentioned about the gun barrel, because I tried very hard to put the gun barrel at the beginning. My intention was always to do that. But if you see the film starts with Bond walking down a corridor towards camera and lifting a gun. And, of course, the gun barrel is him walking, stopping and lifting a gun. And so when I put the two together, it looked ridiculous. It was like, well, shoot the gun already, you know what I mean? It was like he was doing it and then not. So we tried and it couldn't make it work. And in the end, I won't give away why I feel it works really well at the end, but it just worked out that way because of the Bond theme and all that sort of stuff. But I did try. Because for me, by the way, I love the gun barrel logo because being at the beginning, because I remember when I was a kid thinking it's almost the best bit, you know what I mean? It's like everything is possible in that one moment. It's like Christmas Eve, you know. It just feels like, oh, it's actually here. It's a new Bond movie.
It starts like no other franchise.
Yeah, exactly. And I loved that. So I was very, you know, so it was frustrating at the end to not quite be able to make it work that way. Would I do? I mean, I've said what I've said to everybody. I say to you, which is that, you know, I felt I put everything I possibly could into this movie. This is the Bond movie I wanted to make, and if I felt I could do the same again, then I would absolutely consider doing it again because it was a great experience. But that's a big ask, you know. And if I can't, then it's part of the fun to watch someone else have a go. You know what I mean? And I think that you have to embrace that. You know, right, someone else's turn. You know, you have a go and see what you bring to it. I mean, there are lots of people who I'd like to see, you know, have a go. I can't think of anyone off the top of my head, but, you know, they're not going to have to look very far. I mean, surely there's going to be people who are eager to do it.
There's two queues at the moment in Hollywood. I think there's a queue for Bond and a queue for Star Wars. So it's going to be very... Are you in the queue for Star Wars, incidentally?
Although I tell you, if I'm sorry, I'm going to tell you a funny story, which is like... the photo that's on the thing here, which is Daniel holding an imaginary gun, right? You can say, look, where's the gun? You know, it's and you can make. Is it on the photo? Yeah, it is there. You can see you have to write a caption for this, and my caption is, "I'll give you your gun if you're very, very well behaved." Right? Anyway.
The prize is directing Star Wars.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so there's a gentleman here right at the very back with the. Keep your hand up, yes, please. Thank you.
Hi. In terms of Skyfall and the films you've made before, how easy or difficult do you find it standing your ground as a director when you've got a studio or producers behind you with what could be contrasting ideas?
It's never easy. You have to, as a director, justify what you're doing all the time. It seems to me one of the main jobs of a director is to explain what it is that you want. And you have to be good with words, and you have to, you know, a lot of the time your job is to talk and to describe, whether it's to a department head about, I want the set to look this way, I want the light to be over there, this is where I want the window to be, the door to be, this is who I want to play the part, this is the scene I need you to write. You have to be able to articulate what it is that you want to do, and you know, one of the misunderstandings is, you know, I think, or rather, you can get very caught up in a kind of us and them attitude with the studio, or producers, you know, and you just got to remember, you're not paying for it yourself. This is not my money; it's someone else's money, and if you want to spend it, you have to explain why. And as long as you hold that in your head, you know, and you're passionate and clear, then hopefully you've got someone who's able to write the check. You know, the myth that the bigger the movie is, the more fun you're going to have, the more money you're going to have, the more train set is exactly that, a myth. You know, the bigger the movie, the bigger the pressure, the bigger the justification, the more people are going to lose their job if it doesn't work. You know, so you need to be very strong, and you do need to hold your ground sometimes, and be stubborn and a bit cussed. And you need to also, in a movie like this, you need to have the strength to say, okay, there's 300 people. Let's say you're doing a big stunt, there's an explosion. It works. Everyone's thrilled. Everyone's excited. You have to have the ability to take half a step back and say to yourself, okay, it worked, but do I like it? And is it what I wanted when I first imagined it? Is the camera in the right place? Is it telling the story? Is the actor reacting in the correct way? All of those things. And then have the strength, if the answer is no, to say, I know everyone's happy, I know everyone's thrilled, we've just got a big explosion, it worked, but I want to do it again, and I want to do it differently. Well, 300 people look at you like they want to kill you, you know, because they want to go down the pub and have a drink, you know. And you have to understand sometimes the job of the director is to be the person who is bitched about in the pub, because you're never going to please everyone. But you have to have a vision, and you have to hold on to it. And whatever it is, however big the film, it can be a small film, a film you're making, a student film, you've just got to stick with it, you know, and you have to hold that early vision that you had of the film as best you can in your head throughout, and just hold on to it with all your might, you know.
There's a lady here with a microphone.
Congratulations to that fantastic movie.
Thank you.
I would like to know, what is the secret of being that successful, and what advice would you give to people who want to work in that business as well?
Well, I think a lot of what I just said to the gentleman, which holds true, which is that you have to be able to inspire other people, and you have to be able to admit when you don't know the answers, and you have to have good taste in your collaborators and in material. And I think that the most important thing of all is you have to know how to tell a story. I think that you know, everyone in this room has got a camera in their pocket, almost without exception. And if you don't, you're about to buy one. And it's a very, very good quality camera, let me tell you, right? So you've got a camera that's almost as good as the camera I shot this movie on. And I'm not kidding either. I'm not exaggerating. These cameras are unbelievable. So everyone can make a film, everyone. But not everyone can tell a story. You know, try to find a way to tell a story. Study stories. Don't study films. You know, study how, look at that cool Steadicam shot, 2 minutes long, whatever. Big deal. Anyone can do that. You know, really, I mean anyone. But understand story, understand rhythm, understand audiences, you know, how to hold an audience's attention even when people aren't moving, the camera isn't moving, the music isn't playing, and it's just two people in a room playing a scene. That's the thing that I think people often overlook and ignore. You know, we're used to very small things, sound bites, People are very easily bored. But these things last a long time. 2 hours, 20 minutes this movie lasts. You've got to learn how to tell a story and study the masters, who can do it and have done it better than you, and just learn from them.
How long was your first cut?
Not a massive amount longer. It was about the first cut the producers saw was about 6 minutes, 7 minutes longer than the final film. Okay. And the rough assembly was maybe 2:45. Okay. So yeah, never huge.
We got time for two quick questions. There's a gentleman here dressed as Daniel Craig in the in the middle.
As everyone said before, the film was brilliant.
Thank you.
3 times wasn't enough.
That's why the box office is so good.
Exactly, I think I made it.
You can just give your money straight to Sam.
Was it your idea to bring more of the James Bond theme back into it?
Yes.
Because Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace was... I thought they were brilliant, but they were sort of missing the theme.
Well, I didn't know whether I want more or less, because I hadn't studied. I mean, I made that decision, as I mentioned earlier, to not go and watch lots of Bond movies. So I couldn't remember whether it had been in those movies or not. But for me, I remember... Actually, I did have a very vivid recollection of watching Mission Impossible 2 and waiting for, dum 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 dum, and it never happened, and how really frustrated I was, because I loved that theme, and so I did have a feeling that I wanted to use it, but you often go into movies very confident you're going to use a particular piece of music. Like, it may be a theme, or it may just be just one of your favorite pieces that's inspired you, and more often than not, when you put it up in the movie, it doesn't work. I don't know why that should be, but it's happened to me a lot. So I wanted to put it in, but I wasn't sure I was going to be able to. So when I tried it in the cutting room, the moment that the DB5 is revealed, I was thrilled that it worked so well. It's one of the great pieces of movie music in history. I mean, it's a fact, not an opinion. It's the most enduring piece of movie scoring ever, and I think it's brilliant. But when you study the nature of the music is a kind of da 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 da. It's a moment of triumph, and this is a movie that doesn't have many of those. It's a movie that tests Bond to the limit, and it's a release of tension, and it's very difficult to use that unless you've got those grandstanding moments, And as you see from the clips, he starts off, it doesn't go well that first mission. He gets shot. So there's no opportunity there, and later on there were very few. So I was very pleased in the end how much we were able to use it.
We have time for one last question. There's a lady right here in the front row. If you just wait for the microphone, please. Thank you.
Hi, Sam. Great movie. Thank you very much for it.
Thank you.
My question is, do you think now for someone who wants to be film director to start in theater is an option? Or something to try out. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's an option for a film director to start anywhere. You could be a painter, you could be a visual artist. One of the best film directors of recent years, Anton Corbijn, who started as a rock photographer. I mean, it's a question of what direction you approach it from. Theatre is not. I'm not new in that regard. Everyone from Bergman to Orson Welles started in the theatre. There are many, Mike Nichols, many good examples of people who've begun in the theatre and moved into it that way. I think that the thing is, you don't know, telling stories in sequential images is something you either have a gift for or you don't, and you have to find out whether you have that gift. And the nice thing is now that you can use this new technologies to discover that without costing very much money. So I think you can come from anywhere. But theatre is good because you're used to telling stories that last 2 hours to a bunch of people in a room, and in that regard, it's not very different from film.
Fantastic. That's all the time we have, I'm afraid. Sorry if you didn't get your question asked, but thanks for your questions. Thanks for coming. Thanks most of all to Sam Mendes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And then, you go through, I think everyone has sort of a strange relationship, with Bond. It depends which Bond you grow up with, and everyone has different perspectives on it. And one of the things about directing a Bond movie is you do find yourself constantly being bombarded with other people's opinions, and they're all different, because everyone has a different template as Bond. Some are Sean Connery, some are Roger Moore, some are Pierce Brosnan, or whatever. And some wanted to be funnier, some wanted to be more serious, some wanted to go back to the Fleming, some want more gadgets, some want less gadgets, some want more comedy, less comedy. And so you get very used to kind of cutting yourself off from the white noise of everyone's opinion and just trying to make your own Bond, And what I'm most proud of for this movie is that it's very much the movie I wanted to see, you know. And at the same time, I've tried to channel at various points my inner 12-year-old, that little boy sitting watching Live and Let Die, who just, you know, want to give kids and adults that level of excitement again, because it's a big thing.
Was there a moment when it finally hit you?
On to the play a couple of days earlier, he invited me, and I said to, you know, I know Daniel because he had been in Road to Perdition, which I did 11 years ago, and so I'd stayed in touch, and he remained a friend. And I said to him, you know, when are you doing the next Bond movie? And he said, I don't know. And I said, and who's directing it? And he said, I don't know. Do you want to do it? And I can honestly say that I hadn't really thought about it until that moment. And then in that moment, I found myself saying yes. I had a feeling in the pit of my stomach. And the more I thought about it over the next couple of weeks, the better of an idea it seemed. I felt I needed a challenge. I wanted to come back to England and do something on a big scale again, work on a big scale. I wanted to work with Daniel again. And something had happened to me, I suspect, some of the other members of the audience when we watched Casino Royale, which is that Bond seemed to come back to life again as a different kind of character and felt relevant and real and exciting in a way that he hadn't for a while. And it all seemed to be...
Brilliant stuff. Now please welcome the director of Skyfall, Mr. Sam Mendes.
Morning.
It is morning as well.
Yeah.
Well, £20 million opening weekend, the biggest Bond
it
ever.
all comes personally to me.
Do you have an account just waiting?
Yeah, still a Skyfall account. Yeah,
you must be fairly happy with that.
Delighted, absolutely thrilled. Yeah. Yes, and surprised on some level as well. I don't know. I didn't feel it would be that people would take to it to that degree, and so it's really a lovely surprise.
It's a nice conclusion to a journey that began when you were recruited personally by James Bond himself, Daniel Craig. He was the the instigator. How did that happen? How did it come about?
It's like a sort of MI6 sting. I was at a party. He was doing a play on Broadway with Hugh Jackman, and I was at Hugh's birthday party. I don't know Hugh very well, but because I'd happened to got a very good idea. Then of course I had to meet the producers, because really Daniel's is not allowed to offer me the job.
He didn't have the contracts right there and then.
No, exactly. And I think the following morning, after he sobered up, he thought maybe it wasn't it wasn't really his position to offer it to me. But anyway, I'm very pleased he did.
Absolutely. Was there a romance involved when you heard the words James Bond and you thought, oh, maybe is this something that when you were watching Bond movies as a kid, did you ever think, well, one day I'd maybe like to do this? Or?
No, I never in a million years thought I would ever direct a film, let alone direct a Bond film. But of course there's a romance. And I, like anyone, I suspect, or like certainly most of the boys of my generation, began a relationship with Bond 10, 11, 12 years old, and my first movie was Live and Let Die, so I always had a big soft spot, and always have had a big soft spot for Roger Moore and for that particular movie. And I remember vividly how scary and exciting and new and just cool the whole thing felt, and how inaccessible at the same time to me growing up in North London.
And perhaps on set that you were directing a James Bond film, because I know Javier Bardem said that it was a moment, his first day as Silva the bad guy, he couldn't get his words out because he suddenly realised, I'm a Bond villain.
Yeah, I saw it happen. Actually, he obviously had an out-of-body experience. He was in the middle of a speech, and he just blanked completely. And he pointed at Judi and Danny Wiz. That's Judi Dench. That's James Bond. What am I doing here? You know, it was charming because, you know, he had a moment where he thought, I'm in a Bond movie. You know, and. Yeah, I had a few of those moments, but it's funny, you're so focused, there's so much tension and so much pressure on a daily basis with any movie, let alone a movie of this scale. You have those moments when you're on your own. I had them a couple of moments when I finished the movie and I looked at it and I realised that I'd made a Bond film. But you're in such a tunnel the whole time and so obsessed. And also we had a very little time in post on this movie, so I was working on it right up to the moment that we screened it for the first time. Literally 48 hours before the first press screening, I was still making changes, you know.